wisdom in their decision-making, compassion in their deliberations, and courage in times of difficulty, and strengthen all the members of our society that may shun the temptations of cynicism and apathy, and work together to bring about the relief of suffering, the increase of opportunity, and peace among all nations, and the nurture of our environment. Through Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen. Say the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those that trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
This House is in session. Minutes of the meeting held on Tuesday, 24th of February 2026 to be deferred. Honourable Leader, Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move that the aforesaid minutes be deferred.
The question is that the aforementioned minutes be deferred. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. The aforementioned minutes are hereby deferred.
Announcements by Your Honor, Speaker. Messages from His Excellency, the President. Petitions, papers, government notices, private members, business, notices of questions, reports from select committees, first readings of bills, statements by ministers, congratulatory and/or obituary speeches, personal explanations, motions for leave of absence, oral replies to questions, notices of motions for the adjournment of the House on matters of urgent public importance, orders of the day.
Honourable Leader, Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the suspension of standing orders 6, 16, 18, 20, 42 subsection 5, 43, and 44 for the remainder of the day's sitting.
The question is that the aforementioned standing orders be suspended for the remainder of the day's sitting. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. The aforementioned standing orders are hereby suspended for the remainder of the day's sitting.
Government business, sir.
Government Business is the order of the day.
Order number 1, the Appropriation Bill 2026.
Honourable Member for Christchurch, East Central.
Good morning. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I have a relatively simple task this morning to give notice to the Parliament that the 2026 budgetary proposals and financial statements will be on Monday, March 16th at 4 p.m. in the afternoon. And with that, sir, I beg to move that this Honourable Chamber I do not ask that you leave the chair, and this House resolve itself into Standing Finance Committee in order to consider the Appropriation Bill 2026.
The question is that the Speaker do not leave the chair and the House resolve itself into Standing Finance Committee. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
This Honorable House is now in Standing Finance Committee.
Mr. Chairman, Head 96, Ministry of Educational Transformation, in the amount of $289,649,114.
Honorable Member for St. James North.
Thank you, Chair. I beg to seek the leave. Sorry. Thank you. I beg to seek your leave and permission to invite the team of the Ministry of Education Transformation to the well.
Permission so granted. Honorable Member, St. James North. Oh, yeah. Honorable members and to our guests, let me first welcome those from the ministry to this chamber, and let me outline to you what the process is as we move into this debate. Now, the minister has 10 minutes to give his overview of the ministry. Questions are then posed by honorable members, and what happens is that you have 3 minutes within which, these honorable members I'm referring to, within which to pose your question. If you utilize your 3 minutes, your full 3 minutes in preamble and talk, then you would have exceeded your time, and then you would not proceed. Do I make that absolutely clear? 3 minutes for honorable members to pose their questions. The minister, members of his team have 5 minutes to respond to the question. A member is then allowed 3 supplementary questions. Supplementary questions meaning these questions must relate to the initial question that you have asked. And then, if there are no further questions, you will then yield to the next honorable member. And I'm asking members that you would indicate, as you know, you should, by the raising of your name tags, so that I will know in the order which I should proceed from member to member. And let me advise as well, you do not, for instance, if you don't leave your name tag up during a break, and if you leave your seat and you're not here when your time is due, then you will go to the bottom of the class, and you will have to come again. So you will proceed at this time. Honorable Member for St. James North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, at the onset, let me first of all thank my team from the Ministry of Education Transformation who have joined me, and also let me reflect how happy I am with the fact that they're a competent and able team as we continue to lead the effort of transforming our education in Barbados. Now, Mr. Chair, a few months ago, I stood in this honorable chamber and set out a clear vision for education transformation in Barbados. One, of course, grounded in world-class standards, modern learning, and a system that serves every child. That vision has not changed. I repeat, that vision has not changed. And the urgency, if anything, has increased. Barbados is navigating a new reality. A faster global change, greater skills demands, widening learner needs, and the hard truth that climate resilience and digital systems, inclusion, and modern accountability can no longer be treated as optional. They must be built into the core of how we run education, how we teach, how we measure progress, how we support schools, and how we protect learning time. This is why our national transformation agenda is anchored in 5 strategic goals: raising student achievement, empowering educators, modernizing physical and digital learning environments, strengthening the ministry's internal operations, and updating legislative and governance frameworks to match 21st century realities. These are the goals which the ministry has clearly articulated and which this House has already been engaged on. These are not slogans, Mr. Chair, they are the blueprint for delivery. Also, let me be equally clear. Transformation is not a single announcement. It is not a single project or a single budget line. It is a disciplined and step-by-step process of building the system in a transparent way with specific and measurable outcomes so that families across the country can feel the change in real life, in reading, in school safety, in the way our teachers teach, and in the conditions of our schools. Today, I come to treat not only to the estimates, but also the direction of the future of education. I do this because the purposes of this ministry are simple: to give our children the best chance in the world at success, and to ensure that what happens in our classrooms equip them to compete, to contribute, and to survive and to thrive in that ever-changing world. Notwithstanding the transformation agenda, these estimates also provide for the essential day-to-day operational activities that keep our education system functioning smoothly. Schools must open on time. Teachers must be paid on time. Bills must be paid. Materials must be bought. And administrative services must function efficiently. These foundational elements ensure stability and continuity for students and parents and staff alike, and these are the core functions that we are committed to deliver. The estimates therefore make provision for expenses related to the core functioning of the ministry and schools, including, of course, personnel costs, school maintenance, utilities, classroom resources, student support services, examinations administration, and all that is required to run an efficient education system. A well-run system, Mr. Chair, depends on disciplined financial management, timely purchase of resources, responsive maintenance, and structured administrative oversight. In short, whilst we build the future of education in Barbados, we are at the same time safeguarding its daily reliability. Transformation and operational excellence must go hand in hand. Our children cannot wait for transformation to be completed before experiencing stability and safety and consistency in our schools. And these estimates ensure that both the immediate needs as well as the long-term ambitions are responsibly balanced. In other words, we have to walk and chew gum at the same time. It is within that balanced approach, steady in execution and bold in ambition, that I reiterate our national goal, to make Barbados the #1 education system in the world within the next 6 years. This is our guiding North Star. It demands that we strengthen the fundamentals even as we pursue excellence at the highest level. And I remain fully confident that we have the capability, the commitment, and the collective resolve to achieve it. Mr. Chair, why are we undertaking education transformation? Our purpose as a ministry is simple and clear: to give every child in Barbados the strongest possible start in life and the fullest opportunity to succeed. When we invest in our children, we are investing in the long-term prosperity, stability, and resilience of the country. And whilst examinations and the attainment of certificates are important, education is more about equipping our young people with the knowledge and the values and the skills and attitudes necessary towards excellence so that they can build a meaningful and prosperous life, contributing productively to our country. We are committed to nurturing students who are not only confident and academically capable, but disciplined in their conduct, respectful in their interactions, and responsible in their choices. Our schools must cultivate young people who understand the value of hard work, integrity, and perseverance. And at the same time, and importantly, we must ensure that they are socially and emotionally aware. They must know how to say please. They must know how to say thank you. I am sorry. They must also be able to manage their emotions, resolve conflict constructively, show empathy, work collaboratively with others. These qualities are just as essential, and I repeat, these qualities are just as essential as academic achievement in shaping strong citizens and future leaders. Equally, we must prepare our students to compete and collaborate on the global stage. The world our children are entering is interconnected, technologically advanced, and constantly evolving. They must be able to adapt, to be digitally competent, creative, and confident problem solvers. When we deliver on this, I repeat, when we deliver on this, we will not only produce graduates who can thrive anywhere in the world, but citizens who choose to apply their talents here at home, strengthening Barbados's economic, social, and cultural prospects for generations to come. Mr. Chair, what have we been doing, and how have we been laying the foundation? Over the past 2 years, and even more so in recent months, the ministry has been putting in the work to lay the foundation for delivery so that the implementation is not fragmented and progress is not limited to pockets of excellence. This foundation includes a sharper focus on outcomes and defining what the public should see and feel and what the system must deliver. A clearer delivery framework by aligning programs to priorities, ensuring that reforms are implemented in a logical and structured manner, and tightening accountability. Supporting reforms by building quality assurance and modern data systems and governance capability so decisions are faster, they're evidence-based, and they're executed. Targeting learning time and learning support by focusing on attendance and early diagnosis and timely intervention. And lastly, providing resilient learning environments by moving from reactive repairs to preventative maintenance that support learning needs and ensure climate resilience. So, Mr. Chair, what will we deliver? For the coming year, my team and I will lead the ministry with a clear and disciplined focus on 6 public-facing priorities that are straightforward, they're measurable, and rooted in what matters most to Barbadians. These are not abstract policy ambitions. They are practical results that parents should be able to see and feel and experience in their children's daily school lives. Our responsibility is not simply to manage programs, but to deliver improvements that are visible in classrooms, reflected in student progress, and evident in the confidence of parents and communities. And therefore, firstly, we will focus on the whole child. Education is not only about academics, Mr. Chair, and vocational training. We will do this by creating a space within the curriculum for social and emotional learning, by nurturing and shaping the values and attitudes, giving them skills, because this will get them ready to do whatever they need to do in life, and to be trainable at all stages thereafter. Secondly, and importantly, we will return and strengthen the foundation of every child by ensuring that they can read, they can write, they can understand, and compute at expected levels. We must ensure that no one can trick them in life.
Honourable
Literacy,
Minister, you have 2 minutes.
no problem. Literacy and numeracy are non-negotiable building blocks for national development. And from December 2026, we have set the target for ensuring that everyone can do so. Thirdly, we will give students a fairer and more meaningful pathway to success by changing what we teach, how we teach, and how we measure performance. So this is how we teach, and therefore not just a talk and talk alone, but new modern ways to engage the child into learning. This also means not just the common entrance as we knew it, but continuous assessment and exams, both which are used in today's world, but continuous performance now has a wider acceptability globally. And you recall, Mr. Chair, that as of September this year, Class 3 students will have their performance measured and recorded, along with their Class 4 marks, to constitute 50% of their marks for exam, and they will take May 2028, so that the children entering secondary school in September 2028 will not be doing so on the basis of a one-shot common entrance exam, but a mixture of continuous assessment and common entrance. And the methodology for how they enter school will also change, with 50% coming from the catchment and 50% outside. Fourthly, we will fix and modernize our schools. We must continue to make them safe and attractive and resilient. Our learning environments must be welcoming, attractive, and digitally enabled so as to withstand bad weather. We must always bear in mind that our schools are shelters, and therefore we are building and refurbishing with this in mind. I'm happy to also report that we have refurbished 66 primary schools. During the course of the summer, we will also be refurbishing an additional 35 this year. What is noteworthy, Mr. Chair, is that the work done on our schools no longer happen only during the summer, but we are now doing so on weekends and bank holidays and throughout the year to ensure that we can modernize all of our schools at scale and at pace. Fifthly and importantly, we will ensure that our students have the best possible leadership and teachers and support staff that we can offer, so as to ensure that the continuous training and resources that they all need are available. This is a priority for the ministry. And the sixth and final point, we will hold everyone accountable. The ministry, school leadership, teachers, students, boards of management, our partners, of course, in PTAs and unions, and all partners alike. Transformation, Mr. Chair, is an all-of-country effort, and excellence must be shared responsibly, and therefore, once we get this done, we can deliver. So when does this begin? I'm pleased to report that it has already begun. And for the last 2 years, we've been building deliberately and strategically. And therefore, this exercise for us is really about sharing with the country how we're going to continue on building on transformation, whilst at the same time ensuring that we can deliver on rolling out education for our people for generations to come. Mr. Speaker, these estimates support a disciplined national build, starting with the foundation first, and then scaling so that every child in every community benefits from education transformation. And I therefore ask this honourable chamber to support as together we secure this nation's future. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me say to the public officers, Honourable Minister, you need to please move the head. Please move the head.
I beg to move that this head now stands per.
Thank you. To the those public officers here and who will be here for the first time, when you are, if a question is posed to you or it is deferred to you, you would ask that you give your name and the position you hold within the ministry at the outset when you start to speak. Thank you. Honorable Member for St. Michael Northwest.
Hi, good morning to all. Good morning, Minister and your team. My question relates to serious maintenance on schools that are situated within my constituency, the constituency of St. Michael Northwest. Last year, I had, to face a situation in relation to rats at Deacon's Primary School. This is a situation that, honestly, I think could have been avoided through the ministry in the past. My concern relates to the maintenance of Deacon's Primary School, mainly. Also, the maintenance of St. Stephen's Primary School, as well the maintenance at Eagle Hall Primary School. And I really would like to know, during this financial year, because one thing that I can say is that in the past, maintenance was scheduled on some of these schools, and then it was pushed back for whatever reason. But what I would like to know is, during this financial year, what plans the ministry has for these schools that are situated within my constituency.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Let me first start by sharing with you that, as I would have indicated just now in my opening, the ministry has a very aggressive program with respect to the maintenance of schools. Before, the majority of the work done in our schools, particularly through refurbishment, would have been done throughout the summer period. But we've made a very decisive decision that this must continue not only in summer, but throughout the years. But suffice it to say, what we must now do is to ensure that that schedule is maintained, and two, what you're going to see and continue to see, inclusive of the schools that you've just mentioned, is a continued rollout to ensure that our schools are fit for purpose. Because invariably what's happening, we have to refurbish the schools whilst at the same time allowing for teachers and students to go in and to be able to receive tuition. But we've learned from throughout the years that it can't be done only throughout that 8-week period in summer. And what the team in the ministry who leads the refurbishment effort has been doing is to ensure in bank holidays, in vacation period, in Easter, or whenever schools are closed, that we can go in and come out and do what is necessary. But I also want to invite the head of our technical management unit team to also treat to the issue with respect to those three schools and what will be happening this financial year with respect to Deacon's, St. Stephen's, and Eagle Hall.
Good morning. Name is Wayne Baker, Director, Education Technical Management Unit. With respect to the specific question asked, the Honourable will be happy to know that all three schools are due to get major work undertaken during the summer recess. The Eagle Hall Primary School forms part of the Skills for the Future project, and the other two, St. Stephen's Primary and Deacon's Primary, will be having major work done during the summer period under the Education Technical Management Unit. The tender in relation to the work for the Skills for the Future is out already on bonfire, and the ones for St. Stephen's and Deacon's, along with others, will be going live tomorrow with the closing date of March the 25th. And this is to ensure also that we can start the process early and get all the work done that we need to get done before the start of the 2027 academic year. Along with that, we have some plans to do some other work even before that, especially at Deacon's during the Easter period. We put in a set of new louvers in the northern block on the ground floor. We have some we are going to put in on the upper floor as well. But apart from that, during the summer, major work will be done at Deacons, as well as St. Stephen's, and like I said, Eagle Hall under the Skills for the Future project. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
If I can also add to that, Honourable Member, as I would have said in the introduction, over the last year or so, the ETMU team has been able to refurbish 66 of our schools across the country. This, of course, is a remarkable achievement, but we're not going to rest on our laurels. And as I said, in summer, 35 schools are going to be done so as to ensure that we can continue to refurbish. But what is also happening, in addition to refurbishment, part of the transformation now requires us to now look at new modes of how schools are built. And I want to give an example of the Wilkie Cumberbatch School. What the country will now see is new modes of how classrooms are structured, because we're moving away from the chalk and talk type of model. And therefore, the model will now allow for people to have classrooms which are, one, more comfortable, two, not just resilient, but three, allowing for students and teachers to engage in a new way that is now fit for purpose for how we want to ensure that people can learn in the best possible way. So at the same time, yes, we're refurbishing, but we're also building out what the future of schools look like in the country. And this, therefore, allows for us to set in motion, because what's happening? Our school plans are between 50 years old to 200 years old. So I always liken it to having to live in the house whilst at the same time trying to refurbish it. You still have to get up, you still have to make breakfast, you still have to have your shower. But at the same time, the workmen are still there doing what needs to be done. So I want to publicly commend the team for the commitment that they have, but we will continue in earnest, and we're not going to rest on our laurels, because every school in this country, including, of course, your constituency, must be able to now see and feel even further what we're looking to do with respect to transformation.
Okay, thank you.
Honourable Member for St. Peter.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Allow me to, by way of a very, very brief preamble, because I heard your comment, to commend the Minister and his team for work done so far and for being here this morning. The question I have relates to an issue that has been brought to my attention repeatedly as I interact with members of the social partnership, and particularly when I chair the subcommittee of the social partnership. It has to do with the role, the function, the ability, and sometimes the awkwardness of the relationship between trade unions and their representatives and those who occupy the position of Secretary-Treasurer in our secondary schools. I can also say that I have noticed it from personal interaction as well. And my question to the Minister and his team is, what is the role of the Secretary-Treasurer and what type of supervision do they get from the ministry? And the reason why I'm asking this question is because schools are not only educational institutions. They're primarily educational institutions, but they're oftentimes they're places of business because there are contracts awarded. That is also a concern. There are also institutions that have significant labor management responsibilities. And so it is necessary for us to understand exactly the role and what type of supervision there is in place. The challenge that is identified has been identified to me and to others, particularly at the social partnership level, has to do with the fact that there is often seen an intransigence, to use the term that somebody has used to me before. There are small p popes in the school system. And so I'll ask the minister and the ministry to explain, shed some light. And because there are obvious challenges indicate to us how these are going to be addressed? Because I know that this is not the first time that they have heard about these. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Let me start by saying part of what we're now required to do, and we've already started, but we will move in earnest, is to look at the governance model of our schools, and in particular, this respect secondary schools. Now, of course, secondary schools are run by boards, and on a day-to-day basis, there's the principal and there's the secretary-treasurer. But part of that transformation now requires us to look at the training of all who administer leadership in our schools, in addition to the secretary-treasurers. And what must now be clear is that as we go forward, the roles must not be seen in silos, and as you suggested, little kingdoms, but working hand in hand to ensure that we can deliver what is best for our children, ensuring that operations at the schools are seamless and efficient, and therefore allowing us to deliver what we want. But I will also invite our Permanent Secretary, P.S. Bell, to also treat to the question.
Good morning, Kim Bell, Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Education Transformation. The Secretary-Treasurer's role really is there to support the Board of Management of the secondary school in terms of that management of the school, and working, not only representing the Board of Management, but also working along with the principal of the school, because the Secretary-Treasurer is the person that is there on a daily basis. So being the eyes and the ears of the chairman and the Board of Management of the school. As Minister said just now, we do recognize sometimes there may be that measure of uncertainty in terms of where the roles exactly lie, even though it is all settled within the Education Act and its regulations. But what we are doing, though, as one of the tenets of the education transformation pertains to our Education Act and modernizing our Education Act, to make it clear, or should I say clearer, in relation to the roles and responsibilities of each body within the management of the school. That is the principal vis-a-vis that of the secretary-treasurer, vis-a-vis that of the board, the Board of Management and the chairman, because we do recognize that in some instances we have some silence in terms within the legislation that is not quite transparent in terms of the roles. So as we do our modernization of our Education Act, that is one aspect that will be dealt with to ensure that there's greater clarity in relation to the roles and responsibilities, and added to that, continuous training. Last year, we would have done training with our boards of management, and that is something that we intend to do each and every year, because we know persons change, personnel changes, but even when personnel don't change, it's also very necessary for refresher training. So we will be doing that on a continual basis to ensure that, so it's two things: the modernization of the legislation to ensure that there's greater clarity, and where the current legislation may be silent on certain areas, that will be dealt with within the modernized legislation. And two, training, so that persons are fully aware of what their roles and responsibilities are.
Thank you very much for the responses. In terms of follow-up on the original question, I heard mention of two things. One is the training for the boards, and I'm aware that that took place, and I commend the ministry for its work in that regard in terms of training the boards. I am aware, because it was the ministry responsible, that Ministry of Education was far ahead of many other ministries with respect to organizing training and making sure that all boards participated. Now, I'm also aware that secretaries, treasurers were not involved in that training, as far as I'm aware. They were. So my question is, until the legislation makes clear what may now not be clear, what is going to be happening? What is happening in the short term? Because I do not get the sense that after that training, the secretaries, treasurers are clearer in terms of their own roles and where their responsibility stops, or where the authority stops?
In addition to the training that you mentioned, the ministry would have done additional training in September with the boards again, as well as the secretary treasurers. So on each occasion, the secretary treasurers were involved in the training. But there's also the measure of accountability. Because as you do know, in every single job, every single vocation, there are persons who will do as required, and there will be those who will not do as required. And there will have instances where we are so accustomed to doing something that it takes a bit more coaching. And that is what we do. Because we always have that continuous dialogue and coaching to provide persons with or to allow persons to know in terms of what it is that is required of them. So when we have that relationship with our secretary treasurers also. So even outside of the training that takes place, when there is a matter that needs to be dealt with, we speak to the chairperson. We also go directly to that secretary treasurer to give them guidance and advice. And it happens on the other way as well, where they also come to us as well. So it is a work in progress where we continue to work with our boards of management and our secretary treasurers to ensure that what we need from them, that we are getting from them.
Thank you very much. So just a closing comment. I am then able to say to the representatives of the trade unions who interact with your institutions that the training has taken place, will continue to take place, and that they can be assured of greater engagement and more human, decent engagement with the schools that they interact with. That could be a rhetorical question, or it could be one that you would want to respond to.
Indeed, and just to also note that each board of management has a union representative on that board of management. So they're also there to help to give that added guidance. But yes, we will continue to work together.
Honourable member for St. Michael South Central.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Let me say welcome to the Minister and his team. If I could just ask that the Minister please lean into the mic, because we're having a little bit of difficulty hearing you. The other members are clear, but I don't know if you're trying to temper that big voice, but you need not do so this morning. We want to hear you clearly. I'll go directly to my question. Minister, the US and some other jurisdictions have carried out major research indicating that the current school age and school leaving generation is the first generation since formal group education has been introduced to civilization that is not doing better than the previous generation in terms of learning outcomes. That research has tied this to an over-reliance on technological aids in school. I dare say that if we were to do similar kinds of assessment, perhaps in our part of the world, that we might find the same. What caused me to look into this research was my own concern about this over-reliance and the notion that we perhaps have not been strategically deploying technological aids, that perhaps we have gone wholeheartedly from paper-based learning, pencil and paper, wholly on the other side to digital learning. And what we're seeing is that there are developmental delays, poor learning outcomes, and so on associated with this over-reliance. So my first question is, what will be the ministry's approach to balancing the use of traditional learning methods that we know help to improve things like tactile function and some of the other skills that children need, what will be the balance of that approach with the introduction of digital technology in schools?
Yeah, thank you, Honourable Member. I'm sure that you can probably hear me clearer now. Yes, good. All right. So you're right in the sense that over the last few years, not just Barbados, but across the world, you're seeing some gaps emerging, particularly with respect to technology and the outcomes as a result of that. But what we've already started in the ministry is to do the research necessary so as to bring balance to ensuring that we can now ensure that our children, whilst they're learning, have the best possible options in technology and mastering it. And that too, still having the ability to navigate the traditional space and to ensure that they have the core functions that previous generations have had and has worked well for them. And because of, for example, COVID and pandemic, and I'm sure at some point in history, we may have to face that as a global community again, we have to prepare our children to use and to navigate and to master use of technology. Technology, of course, manifests in different ways, even now in terms of artificial intelligence, and the ministry continues to ensure that we can integrate this in our curriculum and learning practices so as to give them the best chance. But equally, that balance requires us to also relook how we use the technology and look at the data and the numbers with respect to those learning outcomes. And therefore, not just as a result of other countries doing it, but the ministry is now taking a firm and decisive stance that we're conducting the necessary research so as to be able to make the best policy decision, to be able to put Barbadian children in our schools in a strong place. Because why? The world will still be in a mode of technology. And of course, we have to prepare them for that even beyond school. But at the same time, those learning outcomes must not be hindered as a result of that over-reliance that you've rightly treated to. A number of countries around the world, including in the Nordic countries and in Scandinavia broadly, a number of them in Southeast Asia have been looking at the same issue. And we've taken a very decisive decision that we will also do the same, not necessarily referencing their outcomes, but using it from a point of view that Barbados must also have its own view as well. And why is this latter point important? We are of the clear view that notwithstanding that there are other models of best practice in education, if we are to pursue the ambition of being the number one education system in the world within the next 6 years, we must also be able to stand on world-class research in education through our ministry. Hence also the retooling and reshaping of our research and planning unit within the ministry as part of a broader modernization of the ministry, so as to be able to bring cutting-edge research to the fore, so as to ensure, additionally, that all the things that we can now do in transformation of education is done by the best tools, the best research, and saying this is where we need to go. But I also like to invite our Chief Education Officer and her team to treat to this.
Thank you very much, Minister. Ramona Archer-Bradshaw, Chief Education Officer. Thank you for the question, Honourable Member. There is indeed a concern worldwide about the over-reliance on technology. One thing, though, that we cannot get away from is the fact that our world is technologically advancing, and there's a need to expose our children to technology. But in Barbados, we say too far east is west. So while the other countries are looking at over-reliance, we are nowhere near over-reliance as a small country. We are exposing our children to digital tools. We're teaching them how to use these tools responsibly. We are also mixing this with play-based approaches to learning, where our younger children, of course, will learn to develop certain motor skills. They learn to catch balls, they learn how to hold a crayon. You know, they learn all of these skills that will help them to build the foundation that is required for lifelong learning. So what I will say is, as a ministry, one of the things that we have built in is the constant monitoring of what we are implementing. So as we implement, we will make sure that there is the balance. We will continue to check to make sure that we are getting the outcomes that we want. And as you will see also in the media, especially with regard to Denmark and Sweden. I think when I read the article just here the other day, they spoke about rolling back the technology because of their over-reliance. And we are learning from them. So because we will constantly be monitoring ourselves, we will not be getting to the point of children over-relying on the technology, because we want them to develop all kinds of other skills, critical thinking skills. We want them to be able to collaborate, communicate, to work with one another. All of these things will be part of the transformed curriculum. We'll expose them to technology, but we are not focusing on relying too heavily on it for the learning.
Thank you. By way of follow-up, in your responses, you made quite a bit of reference to ongoing assessment and learning from what you're implementing. And so my first follow-up question relates to ongoing assessment of special learning needs in schools. And I ask this because I am aware of, over the last few years, a certain reintroduction of certain kinds of testing, certain developmental markers that you're looking for in children at certain ages. But this question was triggered by me because of a concern of a grandmother in my constituency who mentioned to me, she showed great concern about the development of her 16-year-old granddaughter, and the fact that she had reached to this stage now the question is being asked about whether a certain kind of special needs assessment needs to be done. And so her optimization of whatever kinds of learning or teaching would have worked for her, the consideration is that this has been missed, and that she's now at 16 or 17, and new teachers are now realizing that, in fact, she has not acquired much by the way of foundation education, and perhaps even that the way in which she acquires and is able to interact with learning would have needed a different kind of intervention perhaps earlier on. So my question is, how far and to what extent is this kind of assessment really ongoing, such that even at this stage, the ministry, the schools, the entire system that you have would be able to assess this child and be able to still deliver the kind of support that she needs?
Thank you for the question. The reality is we have an education system at this point that really needs education transformation. And of course, it pains me to hear of the story of the 16-year-old who we are now realizing that they need the help. And this is the reason that we are focusing on developing, firstly, an inclusive education policy that will speak to equipping teachers with the requisite tools and the requisite training to identify children who have special education needs very, very early. We're also looking to see how we can purchase or procure certain assistive devices to help our students early on as well. Now, we have behind me the Student Support Services Unit head, and she'll be able to speak more in depth to the inclusive education policy and the kind of training that we would wish to give our teachers, so that the lady who spoke with you will not find herself in that position, or somebody like her will not find themselves in that position. So, Ms. Kay Sargent.
Thank you, Madam Chief. I am Kay Sargent, Senior Education Officer in Student Support Services. And the Chief made reference to the inclusive education policy and framework that the team of the ministry have been working on over the last couple of years. It is our intention to bring to the Cabinet and the people of Barbados a policy document which clearly will state a conceptual framework which is underpinned by principles as the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. We've lined up the policy with the ministry's plans to improve student outcomes in schools, for children with special educational needs. We've also lined up the policy with Barbados, says People with Disabilities Act, passed in 2025. And we are currently reviewing and making several recommendations. One of the things that we recognize that we need to put in place is the legislative framework, which will break down the existing barriers that may exist at the moment for students who may be experiencing some problems and create a more inclusive school culture. The draft policy recommends legislative changes to the Education Act, and we hope that this will ensure that students such as this young lady that you are speaking of will not be in a position in the future. This is a part of our transformational agenda. The policy seeks to strengthen more the system's capacity to promote student well-being, student mental health, and social development. And particularly in this case that you've cited, the policy aims to state what teachers need, what kind of training teachers will need in order to put in place intervention strategies from as early as the nursery school, what intervention strategies parents can put at home, and the support personnel of which student support services will do. We feel that with the inclusive policy it will set out for the nation, it will address issues such as curriculum, making it more flexible for students. So students, in some cases, the teacher will teach the subject area, irrespective of who they have before them. What this policy aims to do is to ensure that there's some flexibility in the curriculum for students who may be experiencing specific challenges. It sets out to meet the diverse learner wherever that learner is, basically. It also includes a framework for improved access to special education provisions, which would include the gifted and the talented student. It will also dictate a more established guidelines for assessment of students. Now, in the past couple of years, we have reinforced the resources within the Ministry of Education to do assessments. It was true that we had one psychologist within the ministry, although we did outsource to private persons when we needed to have assessments. But we have streamlined that over the last 3 years or so, and we have brought on additional personnel to ensure that students who require or students who are experiencing challenges within the system, we can put in place a process of assessment, because through assessment, it will provide the teacher with what really going on with this child here, so that we could see where teachers need to intervene, where teachers need to put in place intervention strategies, teach the child from where it's at. So we're happy to really know that we've put in the resource personnel in place. So assessments did take quite a while before, but from here on in, we are anticipating that we will be in a position to determine a child's strengths and a child's weakness, and therefore plan their education. And if need be, they may need to have an individual educational plan, so that although she is 14, 15, and her cognitive ability or her special needs require the teacher to put in place an instructional plan for her particular needs. That is what will be stated, and that's, well, to be honest, we do that now, but it's not wide system-wide implementation. And so with the policy, this is what we will be rolling out. Thank you.
If I can also add, Honourable Member, the part of the road ahead requires us now to also look not just at assessing that child whilst they're in school, and of course, yes, giving the teachers the ability to spot gaps where they exist. But we now must move, and we've already started discussion with our sister ministry, the Ministry of Health and Wellness, so as to ensure that even before a child comes into the school system, that parents and the wider community can know what deficits, if they exist, or equally, what abilities that child has, so as to determine a number of things. One, it helps with planning, so that that assessment allows for us to know, okay, your child may be 6 months, 1 year old, a year and a half, and it has A or B gaps. And by the time they get into early childhood education, and by the time they get into the school system, the ministry would already be in a position to know what type of teacher with what type of training is needed for that child and which part of the country. So that early assessment, even before they get into school, allows for future planning, coordination, and also the reallocation of our resources, particularly from a personnel point of view. And I make that distinction as well. There was a study which was shown recently that a number of countries, particularly in the Western Hemisphere, continue to face the challenge of a high level of autism. The different arguments as to why that is, but we must now be in a position that, for example, if a child presents autism at an early stage, or even if it was not diagnosed in its current format, we move in a direction that where we can create a framework to allow for us to spot it and to be able to give that child the best possible option for success. And I give a very real example that continues to be an example I speak of. When I was studying law in the UK, I had a colleague in class. He was diagnosed with autism, very high on the spectrum, but he graduated at the top of our class in law. Why? Because the systems were there in the UK, in his county, that from the earliest possible stage of education, he was able to not just be assessed, but the necessary support to be able to carry him through all levels of school and to be able to tap into the ability that he had. And this is, of course, where we're going. So it's not just the Ministry of Education Transformation working on that policy, but of course working with the Ministry of Health and Wellness and other stakeholders so as to ensure that even before a child comes near to the school system itself, that we can spot it and, of course, diagnose and spot. But it also helps the parents to be able to navigate that space, because oftentimes, of course, this is very difficult for them to navigate, particularly if they're not trained. So we must now look at a very broad and overarching strategy as to giving that child, as I said, the best possible chance of success.
Thank you, Minister and team. I only have one follow-up question, but just a quick comment on the previous one. I am encouraged to hear of the plans on policy. However, I had hoped to hear something practical for that grandmother whose 17-year-old is now at the point, and whose family is now at the point where they are worried about that child's income earning capacity. This is a family from a working class community. And so these are practical considerations of care, because a grandmother, you will imagine, who's in the twilight years of life, now has a concern about what will become of this 17-year-old in terms of her capacity to earn a living and to thrive once the family is no longer able to care for her. These are very present considerations. So not necessarily in this session, but I'm hoping that I can hear a practical intervention from the team that can actually literally today help this family. My last follow-up question related to assessment and ongoing assessment again has to do with...
Honourable Member, I thought I heard 3 follow-up questions.
This is my second follow-up question. So,
in my recollection, Honourable Member, you have
No, I have them numbered, 1, 2, 3. This is only my second follow-up.
I am noting the interventions too, Honourable Member. However, you may proceed.
I
but
appreciate
this is
that,
it.
Mr. Chairman. So this has to do with the assessment of students who have been suspended, their assessment and continued engagement with these students, and the level of special interventions that are available. This is a real concern in communities because invariably what happens is that these students become unattached. Some of them, I mean, I don't know who's tracking, but some of them, I dare say, if they're suspended for 2 weeks, they may return to school many weeks or even months later. And I'm speaking about cases of which I'm aware. Another honorable member here is nodding because he and I are about to embark on a program ourselves to be able to address this issue in our communities because these students become at risk for other kinds of behaviors, including ending up eventually, we find, before the criminal justice system. I'm interested to hear from you what is being done now, today, to make sure that these students remain engaged, and what are the plans of the ministry to address this issue?
Thank you, Honourable Member. Let me first treat to the question that you had before, or the comment rather, with respect to that family, of course, at 17 years old, pretty much outside of the school system. Part of what is happening, as you would be aware, but for the benefit of the public, is that, of course, our sister ministry, the Ministry of Technological Vocation and Training, is rolling out an aggressive adult program on a number of fronts, but in particular from the point of view of special education for those who have gone through the system and there were cracks clearly that they've fallen through, unfortunately. We must now work in earnest and are doing so as to ensure that those who have not been able to get what we expect or what was needed can now close that gap. So yes, what we're talking about is current and future, but equally for those who have already gone through the system and have had some challenges, there's that cognizance and realization that partnering with other ministries and stakeholders outside of government is critical and key, so as to ensure that we have that comprehensive and inclusive approach to treating to what you rightly pointed out is a challenge, and in many respects, I'm sure, has happened and is happening across the country. But I will also invite our Deputy Education Officer, Beckles, to treat to the question that you posed with respect to suspension.
Thank you, Minister. Julia Beckles, Deputy Chief Education Officer with responsibility for schools. The first question was about assessment while students are suspended. Once a child is suspended for the duration of time that would in any way impact an assessment, there are a number of things that are being done. If the child is going to Ed Nichols, that assessment can actually be sent there, and the child can complete that assessment. If the child is away from school, then an assessment is given, the school makes provisions, arrangements for the child to be able to do that assessment when the child returns to school. The Honourable Minister also asked about students being away from school and being, as it were, at risk because they are perhaps being involved in activities, antisocial activities, when they're supposed to be on suspension, and then they don't return to school at those times. We've met with our principals, especially those schools where it was clear based on the data that we collected that there was, or rather I would say is, a challenge with students who have run afoul of the rules of the school, and the suspension numbers were quite alarming. And we've asked our principals as far as possible to ensure that when they do move to suspend, that they look again and that they only employ this particular measure when it is absolutely necessary. We've also asked that when students are being suspended, as is supposed to be for more than 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, that those students go on to Edna Nichols, the Edna Nichols Center. Now, when students are supposed to return to school, there's usually a date given on the letter, the correspondence that would go home. And we've also asked our team in the Ministry of Education Transformation, our officers, to work much more closely with our principals to flag students who do not return on the days that they are supposed to return following a suspension. We know of some of those cases, and we have actually had our school attendance officers check to find out why the children have not reported for school. And I can say to you that we are definitely doing more in this regard. As it relates to suspensions generally, I can say to you that we met with the schools which had the greatest number on January 8th of this year. And we spoke about the challenges that the schools were having and discussed some other methods that could be utilized instead of suspension. We generally spoke about behavior at the schools and what could be done to improve behavior so that suspension, if at all used, will be used in the minority. So we are actively working on this, and so far, for the 9 weeks that we have been in the term, we have seen a great percentage, I would say over 60%, based on the data that we have collected, a reduction in the number of students being suspended out of school. Some principals have also offered to have students in what is being called in-house suspension, where the child has run afoul, the parent is contacted, if the parent is made aware that this has happened, but the child remains at school, is allowed to take part while on a reduced basis in activities in the school, but serves that suspension within school. I trust that this answers your question. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Honourable Member for St. Michael South Central. Honourable Member for St. James South.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I want to start by offering my congratulations to the team at the Ministry of Education of Transformation. I know that this team has worked extremely hard, put in many, many long hours, and spent considerable sums in trying to get for our country the very best quality consulting, materials, etc., to make this transformation occur. I just wish that more people were aware of how much work is being done, and I want to congratulate the Minister and the team for this tremendous effort. Now, you spoke, Minister, about the idea of creating a holistic environment where you talked about the importance of improving the physical conditions, creating classrooms that are more conducive. I know that, for example, you would have had a competition with designs and so on, that I believe people would be interested to know what some of those things are. You also spoke to the changes in assessment. And then probably one of the most important is the changes to the curriculum. And that speaks to the fact that we need to change how our teachers engage our students. And I know that for the past couple of years, tremendous work has been done. I would like to ask you to share this with us here in the Parliament and with the people of Barbados. What the teachers have been learning, what kind of difference it is going to make in the classroom. And having done a number of teachers already, what are you already seeing in the classroom? What are the students already experiencing as a result of the changes to how teachers teach?
Thank you very much, Honourable Member and Minister. You're absolutely right with respect to the changes that are already starting to be seen. Over the last few years, and in particular in the last year, a number of our teachers continue to be trained in new modes, not just of teaching, but how do you ensure that you can inspire students to learn. Part of the transformation also will see a lot of student-led type learning, where they now take full ownership of, not just from a point of view of the teacher says A and I write A, but questioning theory, questioning modes of learning, but in an environment that allows for them now to, even beyond school, have the confidence to be able to stand tall and to deliver on what they've learned. And one of the things that we've been able to do as a ministry, even before I came in this capacity, is that the ministry has been able to build some strategic partnerships, not just in Barbados and the Caribbean, but outside of the region. And in particular, Columbia University has worked with the ministry in ensuring that our teachers can receive some of the best training anywhere in the world, but in new modes of teaching. And how do we ensure, therefore, that that teaching continues to now resound to the benefit of the students in the classroom? A number of parents, not the students, but parents, have even written to the ministry and said, a number of teachers who've gone through the training that you've been able to do over the last years, we've been able to see different, not just better grades in our children, but in perspectives, questioning things, and the level of articulation is different. Because why? The teachers feel more inspired, they feel more connected to the curriculum, which continues to change at pace, and therefore, even from the point of view from your ministry, who train our teachers even before they can come into the system, we have to ensure that they continue to receive best-in-class training, which they are getting in many respects. And two, the question also becomes, how do we ensure that all of our teachers who are in the system, through continued professional development, are tooling and retooling in the new pedagogies and ways to teach our children? So it is an exciting time. Yes, we're seeing the results, but I also want to invite the chief and her team to give you some more specifics with respect to some of those changes that have been happening throughout.
Thank you, Minister, for your comments and for your question. The education transformation agenda, quite a heavy agenda, and as our minister just said, we are basically walking and chewing gum. We are looking at changing the curriculum, not only changing it, but changing it so that it's more meaningful for our students. We want to make sure that our children understand the basics, that they have the foundational skills when it comes to literacy, when it comes to numeracy. And you spoke about the long hours that we spend, yes. But I want to tell you, Minister, and the public who's listening, that this will not happen overnight. All of what we're doing will take about 5 years in order for us to see real, meaningful change. But the work started about 2 years ago. And it's like building a house. When you build a house, you have to start with the foundation. You look, you don't see any walls going up yet, and you wonder what's happening. But we've been spending 2 to 3 years just building that foundation. We've been training our educational leaders. We've been training our teachers. With regard to our educational leaders, we've been exposing them to what does it mean to be an instructional leader. Many of our principals are bogged down with administrative tasks, but we often encourage them to remember their why, understand the reason why they're in this position, and that is really to see the children learn. And over the past 2 to 3 years, we've seen an improvement in the way that our principals have been leading. Of course, we have to give some of them some additional support, and we've been doing that at the primary and at the secondary level through the University of the West Indies and other private entities. Our education officers are also going in and doing a lot of hand-holding. I'm happy to report that we have had an increase in the number of education officers who can go in and not only to monitor and correct, but to coach and to guide and to bring about the kind of school improvement that we want to see. Our teachers have been engaged in workshops dealing with project-based learning and play-based learning. And what does this really mean? It means that instead of a teacher standing in front of a group of children and telling them, what they need to know to pass an exam,
The children are using questioning. You know, they're asking their teachers questions. They said, teacher, you know, well, yesterday I was riding my bicycle and I realized that this happened. This has to do with what you're teaching here. So it helps to link the learning to everyday life. And the research shows that when children link the learning to everyday life, true learning occurs. It is more meaningful to them and they can carry it. And you know what? Learning also becomes fun for them. And we want learning to be fun, that they don't only see that at 16 years old, yes, I'm finished with that, I'm glad to be out of school, hooray, but they say, you know what, I want to continue to learn. I spoke about reading and writing, because you asked about some gains, and I did say that it will take some time to see gains, but I'm pleased to report that last year, when we looked at the BSSE marks, for mathematics and English, there was an improvement. We moved from 65.2% from the year before, this is in English, to 72.5%. Last year, we moved from 54.6% in math to 60.2% in mathematics. So we've been seeing some incremental gains, and we will continue to work over the next 5 years in a very targeted, in a very meaningful way to make sure that learning occurs in the classroom. For us, it's also about developing the whole child. The minister spoke about the fact that we will not only be focusing on the academics, but we'll be looking at the social and the emotional learning side. We want children to see the ethics in things. You know, to say please and to say thank you, to say sorry. We want global citizens, yes, but we want to make sure that they have what we call good old Bajan values, so that they're recognized anywhere in the world. When anybody sees them, they will say, okay, this person here is a Bajan. That is our brand. And really, this education transformation is happening through the Ministry of Education, but really it is a national transformation that we are hoping to bring about. Because when the children are at school and they're experiencing all of the things that the minister spoke about, you know, when they go home, they say, Mommy, Daddy, this is what I did today. Then the parents are interested, then you can get the kind of change that you want to see in each community and eventually throughout the nation. So yes, we've been doing quite a lot. I mean, I could spend the whole day talking about education transformation. We've been doing quite a lot, but it redounds to the mantra that we have, where we are not just teaching a subject or just teaching subjects, we are teaching students for life. Every child, Barbados.
I just wanted to ask you to give, and thank you so much for that, because education transformation is exciting. And I just wanted to ask you to share what are some of the specific things that the teachers are now learning in the project-based and play-based, and how does that work out in the classroom in a way that the child learns values and that type of thing. I think there's some innovative ways that y'all are teaching that, using those approaches. So if you could help us and educate us.
Thank you very much. In terms of the project-based learning, some of our teachers across the system are already utilizing it. But what it basically entails, it speaks to a shift from the talk and chalk that happens in the classroom, where our teachers are just preparing our children to pass an exam. It allows for our children to, as I had said before, to ask questions, to link their learning to everyday life. They will see how the science connects to the business, how the business connects to the English, how the English connects to the math. You know, for example, you may have students asking the question, how do I get rid of the seaweed from off the beach? That's a simple question, but that calls for a lot of research. They have to determine, how did the sargassum seaweed get there in the first place? Okay, now it's here, how do we remove it? What materials can I, or what merchandise can I make from the same sargassum seaweed? So all of this calls for research, it calls for collaboration. They might have to write letters to the Ministry of Environment, so you can test the letter writing skills there. So really, it allows the children to demonstrate what they know and what they're able to do in real life settings. And the teachers, there are teachers across the system who are using it more so after having been exposed to the project-based learning workshops. And this indeed will contribute to creating the kind of citizen that we want. Because we are not one-sided individuals that, we think in terms of biology, or we think in terms of chemistry, or we think in terms of math. Everything that we do is very interconnected. And in teaching in an interconnected way, it helps our children, therefore, to navigate life in a more interconnected, problem-solving, purpose-driven way.
Thank you very much. And my last follow-up question, in terms of, we talked about the holistic environment, the infrastructure assessment, and curriculum. I know safety was a major issue with the schools, and that a significant amount of work has been done in relation to looking at the policies and the things that you're going to put in place. So if you could share with us what are some of those things that you are looking at so that the population has the confidence that we are working on something that is critical to families and so on. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, yes, we've been working on a safety and security policy because we recognize that no learning can take place in an environment unless the students feel safe, staff feel safe, parents, when they visit the compound, they feel safe. So I am pleased to report that there was approval given to that particular policy, and we will be looking to make that material in very short order. I will call on the Deputy Chief with responsibility for schools, who has responsibility for ensuring that it goes out as it should.
Thank you, Madam Chief. While we wait on the policy, we have put in place some protocols in all of our schools, and some of these protocols begin right at the gates as it relates to security. We've asked that all security guards, in fact, we have placed we have placed security guards in all of our primary schools, and we have asked that at the gate, there be the registration of personnel and visitors, so that we have a log of the persons who are entering and leaving the compound. We've also asked that principals indicate to parents and guardians their protocols as it relates to visiting the school for appointments and visiting the school when they have challenges and they wish to speak to the management or they wish to speak to any teacher in the school. We've asked that they communicate that in writing to all stakeholders. So while we wait, there are at least those two matters that we have worked on. We've also worked on some of the technological security. There are some schools where we were having some challenges with break-ins, and they, as part of their school improvement plans, have asked the Ministry of Education to support them, and we have done that readily because we understand that we need to have safe environments for all who work and study there. As it relates to situations that occur, for example, environmental hazards, sometimes we have challenges with fires, and we have smoke emanating from fires and schools being engulfed in smoke. While we are aware that the core function of schools is teaching and learning, we are also very mindful of the fact that our teachers, our support staff, and our children must operate in a safe environment. And the Ministry of Education Transformation has moved with haste whenever we have been contacted as it relates to the school environment being impacted in any way, to ensure that we evacuate our students and our staff from those environments, and that we deal very frontally and very, very summarily with whatever is causing the challenge. As it relates to the fires, we have a wonderful relationship with the Barbados Fire Department, Fire Service. And anytime we get information that there is even the smallest sighting of a fire, we are able to be in contact with them. They respond, but while they are responding, we are also responding because we understand that it only takes a few seconds for persons to feel the effects and that everybody's tolerance level is different. So that is another area of safety. We're also working on the school's responses to fire and other hazards, in the sense that we have asked them to be very proactive in having drills. What we have done now is we have sent information to all of our schools, and we've asked them that when they're having a drill, they need to let us know a week in advance. And what we do is that we take that information that has been sent to us, we peruse it, and if there is any need for additions, if there's need for an upgrade, if we think that they need to partner with, for example, the Barbados Police Service or any of the other entities to make sure that what they're doing is of the best quality, we invite them to do that. And we saw our drills. We know when there's going to be a drill, and the other reason for knowing that is so that when Barbadians, and Barbadians are very concerned about what happens in our schools, that when they see large number of students outside of a school, they don't panic and want to know what is happening. I believe, rather, that something really untoward has happened. We've also asked our principals to indicate to parents and guardians when it is likely that there will be a drill. So those are some of the other areas of safety that we are working on while we wait on the plan. We are not waiting, we are actually working. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I'm very pleased to hear that we're making progress in all these very key areas. Thank you, Minister.
Yeah, thank you, Honourable Member. If I also can jump in there, a number of things have been happening on this front of safety in our schools. One, of course, all schools now have a health and safety committee. Yes, the ministry retains the oversight and regulatory framework for that, but it is important that schools have a sense of ownership in that day-to-day operation of health and safety. But as we look broader at health and safety itself, it also goes down to the things and the protocols now that the chief and her team have been working on with respect to the use, for example, at the secondary level and also primary, the use of chemicals, the storage of chemicals, so as to ensure that should you come into contact with them, it minimizes risk or ensures that it is not affecting anyone. First aid training for all of our staff so that should there be an emergency that requires that skill, it is there until a first responder can get to the school. Additionally, what we're also looking at too is what we call safe zones, working now with our sister ministry, the Ministry of Transport. Why is that? When you drive into a space of a school, regardless of where you are in the country, pedestrians and drivers alike, motorists, must be able to discern ahead of time that we're coming into a space where school children are and teachers are. And therefore, the intent is that whether it be paint on the road saying school or school zone, or a sign visible to motorists and persons coming in, similar to how you drive in front of the hospital, you know it's a quiet zone, and therefore your conduct must be shifted accordingly. The direction that the ministry is taking, working with the Ministry of Transport, is to ensure that all schools have that same framework. So with respect to noise, with respect to the adequate speed of vehicles, and also things like schools on a highway. Even in my own constituency, Gordon Greenwich Primary comes as a very classic example. It is right on the highway, the fence. But Lord forbid, should something happen, we now have to make sure that we can create a space where even the perimeter is protected, given the high velocity of vehicles going forward. So that's the kind of safety. And then lastly, it's not just about the safety of persons coming into the school and the threat bearing somebody coming into school and doing something untoward. Given that we're now moving and have moved in the digital environment, digital safety is also key. and giving the teachers and students and the parents as well that training and support so as to ensure that our children are protected in a way that does not cause any harm to their safety as they engage in their tuition whilst online. So it's a very, very comprehensive exercise that we've embarked upon, but the work continues, so thank you.
Honourable Member for St. Michael Southeast.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I beg to move that you do now report progress to His Honor the Speaker and beg leave to sit again.
Beg to second it.
The question is that I do now report progress to His Honor the Speaker and beg for leave to sit again. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
The chairman of committees has reported progress and sought leave to sit again.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move the suspension of the House until 15 minutes past 12, please.
Beg to second it.
The question is that this honorable chairman will be suspended until 12:15 p.m. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This honorable chairman stands suspended until 12:15 p.m. This sitting is resumed. Prior to the suspension, this honorable chamber was debating the appropriation bill 2026, so that we shall return.
We resume our standing Finance Committee session. Honorable Member for St. Michael Central.
Good morning, and thank you, Mr. Chair. Education for me isn't just a line item in a budget. It is the single greatest investment that we can make in the young people of Barbados. So I must commend the ministry and I must commend this government for continuing to invest so heavily into education and the young people. But we can't speak of education and ignore the teachers. We have to speak of the teachers as well. And there are many complaints coming, particularly from my constituency as well, where there are teachers who are not getting paid on time and they're not being appointed after having worked sometimes 7 years or more. And it leaves them in a peculiar situation because then they can't approach the financial institutions to get the loans and other things they would need to help improve their quality of life. So we can't continue to speak of education and neglect the teachers. So my question to the ministry is, what measures will the ministry implement in this new financial year to ensure that teachers are being paid on time and that persons who have dedicated 7 years or more of their lifetime to teaching are put in a more secure position by way of appointments?
Thank you, thank you, Honourable Member. With respect to the question of the payment of teachers and paying them on time, one of the things that is now happening in the ministry in earnest, before, broadly, and this is historically, there was a disconnect, not just in our ministry, but in other ministries as well, between the HR side of the ministry and the account/financial side. And that disconnect has caused significant angst and frustration, rightfully so, amongst our teachers. And what the ministry has done and is doing is to ensure that the system of ensuring that connect between the HR side and the finance side is now closed, and the gap, so as to ensure that people can now have their salaries on time. There's been marked improvement, particularly over the last year on this issue, but we cannot stop until it is settled once and for all. With respect to the issue of appointments, you would have seen, and the country would have seen, a number of appointments, not just of teachers, but public servants across the board over the last few weeks and months, particularly coming from the legislation passed in this chamber just on the end of last year. But I also want to invite our Permanent Secretary to treat to this issue so as to walk the country through where we're at with, one, the payment of the teachers, but also as the broader consideration of transforming the ministry and how do we make the ministry more efficient and real time. And then two, on the issue of appointments.
Thank you very much, Minister. You would have hit the nail on the head in both instances, so thank you for that. In relation to payments on time, we would have ensured, because you have heard Prime Minister spoken on many occasions about deconstruct and reconstruct, and we would have looked at our processes within the ministry to ensure that we can streamline and improve about how we go about doing our business to make sure that persons are paid on time. We are firm believers as if you work, you should be paid. And not be paid months later or years later, but you should be paid on time. So we have worked assiduously, our HR section and our accounting section, they have developed a system where there's a smooth, improving that process to ensure that when persons are worked, that they are paid not only salary, but also allowances, because we know that that too was an issue. And I say was an issue because it is becoming more so not much of an issue anymore. The system is not perfect, so I will not sit here and say all of the matters have been resolved or that we have a perfect system as yet, but it is near there. So the complaints, the calls have significantly been reduced, and persons are receiving salaries on time. In relation to appointments, I must also thank the Prime Minister and the Minister of the Public Service for the Appointments Act that was passed in January of this year, which allowed for appointments of those persons who had three or more years service at January 1, 2026. And that has resulted in over 400 teachers being appointed so far, as in having received their appointment letters so far, because the letters are still coming. And they will continue to come because our educational system, we have over 3,000 teachers, over 3,000 teachers. And the Ministry of the Public Service, they have to prepare those letters for the entire public service for all those persons who would have, right, we have 3,647 teachers to be exact. And that is just one category of persons for the entire public service. So far, we have received letters for over 400 persons, and I know more will come as the Ministry of the Public Service is able to send out all those letters because it's right across the public service we have probably over 15,000 public officers. Not saying that all of those persons will be appointed, but that just gives you, in terms of the large number of persons that we have within the public service, and therefore the number of persons that would receive appointments, some fraction of that. But knowing also that the Ministry of Education, we take up a large chunk because we are pretty much along with Ministry of Health, in terms of the large number of employees that we have. So the appointments are coming for those persons who have 3 years or more service at January 1. Over 400 persons would have received their appointment letters, and more are coming each day. So the appointments are occurring. Added to that, though, the ministry, the appointment process in terms of recruitment and selection for the teaching service has been devolved to the Ministry of Education Transformation. So in addition to that, what we are also doing, and that has aided in, given that it has been devolved to us, it allows the system to be more efficient. So we no longer have to wait on another ministry to do our appointments, our recruitment and selection for us. We have the ability now to do it ourselves, going towards but it still goes to the commission, but all of that groundwork happens within the ministry, which therefore allows for improved efficiencies and speed in relation to recruitment and selection for those vacant positions. That has been devolved to us, so we will continue to fill those positions that are very much critical to the functioning of a modern education ministry.
I also want to add, Honourable Member, as a follow-up to your initial question. When I first came in the ministry last year, I was met with a number of teachers around the country in different consultations. And one of the things that came up constantly so in the different zones was that teachers also want to be able to, if they want to go to the bank, they need a job letter. They want to be able to apply for vacation leave or sick leave in real time. And yes, we're not there just yet, but we've made a very clear and deliberate intention that teachers must be able to, if they want a job letter to go to any institution, to be able to do so similar to what happens in other parts of the world online, and to be able to receive that in seconds. Now, I say we're not there yet, but the ministry through our IT team is working earnestly so as to ensure that a teacher at 1 a.m. in the morning or 4 in the afternoon or wherever can go online and to get all of that information that you would have in a job letter, to be able to download it and to have the ministry's seal so as to ensure the authenticity of that document and not have to write to the ministry and wait till somebody signs it. Again, that's part of the transformation, but using technology so as to deliver that efficiency and speed. And then second of all, you should be able to track how many days you have left in the year for sick leave or vacation, whilst being able to do that from your tablet or your phone. And it frees up the time in the ministry to do other things, but you are assured that that document is authentic because the process behind the scenes would have gone through the finance side and the HR side to verify all that information in the document. And that has been happening in earnest. The PS and her team have worked over the last few months to now bring in the skill sets to be able for us to deliver that. So the country can rest assured that later in the year, that our teachers will be able to do these things real time in a matter of seconds, so as to not just have to wait and come down to the ministry or send a messenger as you've had to do before.
Thank you. I have a follow-up to that. I'm being told, and of course I'm subject to correction, that the appointments are really only looking at the full-time temporary teaching staff. So my question is, what about the part-time temporary teaching staff? Because I'm being told that even though they're part-time, they're still coming to school every single day. So is the ministry making provisions for the part-time temporary teaching staff to also be appointed, having come to school every single day for the past 7, 10, 20 years?
Okay, so part-time teachers, so to be appointed to a position, it must be a post that is within the order, an established position. Part-time position, the post of part-time teacher is not within an order, which therefore prevents appointment, full-time appointment, or permanent appointment similar to what you would find for a established position, a full-time position. But that is something that the Ministry of Education would have to discuss with the Ministry of the Public Service to see, and because it has also legal ramifications as well, so it's something that would have wide-ranging discussion to see how that can be, or if it can be facilitated.
Thank you. My second question will be towards your sub-program 280, which is Skills for the Future. So my question is, how will the Skills for the Future program be operationalized at the secondary level to ensure that students from constituencies like mine, St. Michael Central, can transition directly into gainful employment, entrepreneurship, or technical certification upon completion? Because oftentimes students go to school and they leave with certificates, but then they have no job opportunity, and as such, they end up in crime.
Thank you for the question. I can see components 1 and 2 in the Skills for the Future project addressing the concerns that you just raised. Component 1 deals with the modernization of the curriculum. We want to make the curriculum more meaningful and more relevant for our students. It therefore means that we have to take a look at what is happening or what is being taught in mathematics, what is being taught in English, what is being taught in science, what is being taught in social studies / citizenship, and we have to ensure that our children have a functional foreign language. That is very important because we see those subjects that I just mentioned as the core. And if we don't get the what right, when I say the what is being taught right, students will not succeed. So you can have a teacher who's teaching using the best methodologies, but teaching the wrong thing. You will have a child who will not reach his or her full potential. So that's the reason that we're investing so much first and foremost in ensuring that our children have the what. We're now focusing on the how, making sure that we equip our teachers with certain methodologies so that they can teach effectively in the classroom. And I mentioned some of them earlier, like the project-based learning and the play-based learning. And we will ensure also as part of the curriculum that we share guides with the teachers as well. Because even though we can give the teachers the syllabus and we give them, we expose them to a few workshops, it's always useful to have curriculum guides that teachers can refer to and say, well, okay, let me see what to teach after this thing, what to teach after that thing. So those are the first 5 subjects represent the core areas. We're also focusing on additional areas such as coding and robotics, TVET. We're looking at the orange economy because you will realize that across the world, people are making a lot of money from performing arts, visual arts. If you even look at our very own Rihanna, we're looking at financial technology, making sure that our children can understand that. So it's all about creating this whole person when they leave the basic education system. And this will equip our young people with the attitudes, the skills, the values that they will need in order to be excellent. So that answers the first part. The second component that I mentioned is the inclusive education. The mantra that we use all the time whenever we speak about education transformation is every child Barbados. Not only those with ability that can go ahead and pass exams, but we want to make sure that every child has the opportunity to succeed. And it's about closing those gaps. I heard Ms. Kettle speak about the 16-year-old who had a special need, and the child is now 16 years old, and we don't have to figure out now how we are going to assist her to reach her potential. We don't want that throughout the education system. So we have to start from early, from 3 years old, to close those gaps. We have to screen, and we've started our screening in terms of sight through the Ministry of Health and Wellness. We gave them 4 acuity charts for 4 polyclinics. So children can go and use those acuity charts, and they will be taken through the process to determine whether they can see. Because if we recognize that they can see, we will now have to have some kind of intervention for them to give them that foundation that is required. In terms of hearing, we did a lot of screening of children for hearing with the Rotary Club of Barbados. And all actually they finished about 2 weeks ago. They've been in schools, all the schools across Barbados, just checking to make sure that children can hear. Because sometimes what can happen in a classroom is that you might have a child not performing well, and the teacher may think, well, it has to be because the child has a learning difficulty. But it may be as simple as the child not being able to hear, right? So these things are very, very important for us in terms of closing the gap. And that's why component 2, which looks at the inclusive education policy and making sure we have certain standards for teachers, standards in terms of how we go about intervening, when it speaks about training for our teachers, having the correct resources, physical and human, to support those children who have special education needs. Those things are very, very important. So I believe that with closing the gaps with the curriculum, component 1, and with the inclusive education, component 2, we'll be able to produce children who can go out into the workforce and make their way, be good Barbadian citizens who can contribute to this society.
Thank you. As a follow-up question to that, so I'm hearing from the practical standpoint or the theoretical standpoint, yes, we're going to do these things to make sure that by the time the child leaves the school, they're qualified on paper. But is the ministry going to be given any opportunities, for example, job attachments or internships, where by the time they leave, they will also have a certain level of experience? Because oftentimes employers, they don't really care about what you have on paper, but how many years experience do you have to make yourself hireable?
That's an excellent question, because as I speak about curriculum, part of the delivery will speak to internships for our children as well. So we will not wait until they're finished 5th form to say, go into the world, and do what you have to do. We're going to give them the practical experiences, the practical job experiences while they are at school. And I must say that at some schools already, we have been forging these linkages. And they do redound to the benefit of children, because when they go out into the world of work, they already know how to operate some of the machinery. They already know, how to, they're now a step above or a step ahead, right? And they're able to go out and really make a difference. So yes, internship for us, that's all part of the authentic experience of which we speak when we speak about a true education for our children.
It's also an opportunity, thank you, Chief. It's also an opportunity, Honourable Member, and I want to use this occasion to speak directly to our country's private sector. You would have heard me spoke this morning about partners in education. We are very clear, of course, that government and of course the ministry can't do it alone. And your point on internships and giving our children the skill set even before school is key. And I want to use the occasion even further to encourage the private sector, particularly by different sector, whether it be in construction, whether it be in banking, whether it be in finance, whether it be in technology, in fashion, music, you name it, to work with the ministry, approach the ministry, of course, subject to all the necessary frameworks and protocols that we must go through, in helping us to ensure that our children have the necessary skill set from a practical point of view. And therefore, as I said, partnership in education is something that we're going to continue to roll out. In addition to that, it focuses on working with the non-governmental organizations and a wide cross-section of other stakeholders in helping us to build out the water transformation. So on this front, it is something that we are incredibly happy that we've already started, but we must now do so in earnest and at scale.
Thank you. I'm waiting to hear if I'm allowed another question. Was that, Mr. Chair?
It can only be the follow-up question. If you have, it cannot be a new question. We'll come back.
Guided. So that will be it then. Thank you.
Honourable Member for St. Andrew.
Thank you, Chair. Education transformation cannot exist in isolation to national identity. And even as we transform, we cannot do so at the expense of our national consciousness or national memories. Some years ago, the ministry would have spearheaded a project where we looked at reintroducing our students, especially those in the primary school, class 3s and class 4s, to the history of Barbados, the post-colonial history, the colonial history, and the journey that this country would have taken from that period to now, with the view of bringing greater awareness to our young people, instilling greater sense of pride in our young people, and a greater sense of self. What I want to know now with your move towards transformational, educational transformation, how does that integrate the history of Barbados? How does that align with your new curriculum going forward? If that's the first part of the question. The question has the second part. And as it relates to our common entrance exam, have we looked in any way, shape, or form, and also even as that goes through the process of transformation as well, how does our history, how will our history be integrated into that as well?
Thank you, Honourable Member. For the two thematic questions you've posed, one simple word: curriculum, curriculum, curriculum. The first one, and we've already started, and we'll continue in earnest, is to ensure that the reform of the curriculum, what we teach the children, takes into full cognizance the fact that Barbados has a rich history, also a history that had its challenges, but inclusive of that, resilience. Being cognizant of the fact, yes, that for 400 years we've had to go through some challenges, but we've been able to overcome. Being cognizant of the fact that a number of things that we did not study in our time, certainly as honorable members when we were at school. And what do I mean, for example? I knew more when I was at foundation school about British history and British literature than I knew the fact that, you know, in the Caribbean and certainly in Barbados, there were titans of literature that helped to frame national consciousness. And therefore, I'm not saying that we wouldn't necessarily study a Shakespeare as an example, but part of the reform of the curriculum is to also give pride of place and value to Barbadian and Caribbean literary champions, for example. In addition to that, only a few years ago, many people in Barbados were aware that Barbados was a country that was able to produce 3 presidents in Liberia. But that historically has not been something taught in our system. But in addition to that, even closer to home in terms of time, when you look at our $2 bill, John Redmond Bevelle, who would have invented or grafted 2 citrus fruits, what we now know as the grapefruit, that is not something that intrinsically is taught in our system. But it's also about not just the history, but the future. Barbados has a comparative advantage in terms of our location and logistics, and as a potential logistics hub, which of course the government is moving in earnest to. And therefore, part of that curriculum transformation and reform is also to give our students, as early as possible and right throughout school, getting them to think not just critically, but to be able to leverage on what makes Barbados unique, what gives Barbados an advantage in certain things. And therefore, whether you want to be a business person or own a company or whatever, it should be in your mental consciousness once you've passed through school to be able to leverage those things. You would hear the Prime Minister talk constantly about the fact that we have not just Barbados as an opportunity for persons to do business and invest, but our students must now also be exposed to the fact that we have a CARICOM single market and economy. How do you leverage the fastest growing economy in the world, which is Guyana, and its agricultural prowess? You have Suriname, just as examples. So therefore, the reform of the curriculum must now not just teach our history, but we must use that history as a tool to instill that confidence that Barbados has the ability to be world-class, to be thought leaders, but 2, leveraging the prospects of all of what we're learning so as to ensure that even when our students leave school, that they're prepared to lead the world in any endeavor, in any field that they're pursuing. That is, to my view and the ministry's view, the real test of the success of a transformed curriculum. So that, yes, we're being cognizant of that history, but now using it as a tool to leverage the future prospects of Barbados. And it comes at the ideal time. Certainly this year, of course, is 60 years as an independent nation and 5 years as a republic. But as I said in the opening this morning, with respect to transformation, it is not a destination. It is not a single project. Future generations of Barbadians must also carry on the legacy of transforming the curriculum, because what is relevant today will have to be retooled with what's relevant in the next 10, 15, 20, 60 years as well. So your point is well taken, but we're now deliberately and strategically intertwining and weaving into the fabric of the curriculum all of the different things that we've been able to overcome throughout the years, but leveraging it for the future. And then lastly, when you look at how we've been able to navigate the weather systems, Barbados and many other countries are on the front line, of course, of the climate crisis. But the architecture in which our foreparents have been able to use in circumstances where many of them did not go to any fancy schools or university, but good old-time Bayesian knowledge. They were able to withstand the climate crisis in how they design the buildings and able to let the wind go through. These are the types of things that we have to now integrate fully into the curriculum again. So whether it is technical drawing, whether it is physics, the curriculum must come alive to our reality. And then the third and important layer to that is helping our young people to be able to transition now beyond school. So it's not just about CXC, it is about how are you using the subjects that you've learned and knowledge learned from primary school right up to be able to create what we call, as you know, the knowledge-based economy. Because Barbados, of course, is not a country with any large oil deposits or gold, etc. But our strength, as cliched as it has become, is through our human capital. And we must be able to turn all of the ideas anchored in that Bajan resilience and confidence to be able to solve global problems by way of the exposure that our young people will have through the education system. And that is also why you would have seen, of course, in a recent national event or election, the now government saying through its manifesto that the next tier of our development in education has to be the exposure of our young people to the world, even before they leave and graduate from secondary school. Because by the time they get into the global community, they must already have the tools at their fingertips, undergirded by what we're giving them in critical thinking and values and confidence to be able to spot opportunities in the world and to be able to navigate a world that is changing at pace. We only need to look around now at what is happening in the world. And therefore, if we think the world is challenging today, imagine what it will be in a few years, a few decades. But what is certain about the uncertainty of the future is that there will be challenges that will come, but we have to now prepare them and give them the tools, as you rightly said, looking at the history and being able to leverage and pivot forward as we go forward.
Will not just be taking an approach where our students will be learning dates and events, because that certainly would not be enough, but more a critical understanding of history and what history means to us, what our cultural heritage means to us. And I had asked also about the reforms to the common interests. Yes.
All right, so I will invite the chief to speak to that a bit, but one of the things I want to talk about that, and it's funny you prefaced it by history. The truth is, with respect to the common interest, and one of the reasons why the ministry has taken that deliberate step in ensuring that we move to a new mode of transitioning our children from primary to secondary, is that the common entrance in its current form, started as a British experiment years ago, decades ago. And the British, they themselves have moved on from it because they too have realized that it was not fair and it was not equitable. And then in a broader perspective, it does not tap into the true potential of the child who at age 10 or 11, you're asking them to sit a one-shot exam. And then, we also understand the sociological perspective in Barbados of what that has meant for many people. And therefore, this new mode allows for us to assess as part of a broader continued assessment in education, looking at the progress that they've made in their learning, but two, preparing them even beyond secondary school. But for the purpose of the transition, you would see, of course, 50% of the assessment being done in class 3. So from this coming September, all of our students going into class 3 will be taking 50% of the assessment, and then in class 4, similarly, in a number of areas in which the chief and her team will be speaking to. And the purpose of that, as I said, is to look at the broader perspective of how do we ensure that our children can now have a fairer chance spread across 2 years to help them, one, to be assessed, but two, give them a fairer chance of success in that transition as they go forward. So Chief, I open to you.
Thank you, Minister. You said it very well. In terms of national identity, if we are ready to produce global citizens with Bajan values, and that's where we want to start, it means that the curriculum itself must be designed that it teaches our children how to be a Bajan and what it means to be a Bajan. And that's the reason why from reception, we'll be teaching children about citizenship. It is one of the core areas. They're going to understand about the landship, susu, worry, putting themselves. And the minister used a very important word earlier. He said resilience. All of these things came out of us being resilient at the point in time. If you consider putting themselves, when the master threw away the pig ears and the pig foot and the old potatoes and so on, the slaves took the pig ear and pig foot and made something beautiful that we enjoy, most of us enjoy every Saturday. You see? So our children need to understand that there is good in being a Bajan, and that's the reason that we'll be introducing it from very early, from reception all the way until they go through, until the ending of secondary school. With regard to the assessment, the continuous assessment, it therefore follows that citizenship will be measured in terms of the continuous assessment, because there's a saying that what gets measured gets done. For years, we have focused on math and English at the expense of teaching children science and social studies and citizenship. Even sometimes you go in the classroom and you go into schools, you will see teachers teaching the math and the English when science should be taught. Why? Because what gets measured gets done. They want their children to do well in the common entrance. Common entrance measures math and English, so that's what they're going to focus on. So we are trying to bring about that shift, that paradigm shift when it comes to assessment. And not only making it one shot, where you're preparing the children for an exam, but allowing the children an opportunity to learn and express themselves in different ways, thereby gaining a greater appreciation for who they are as Barbadian people. So that is how we will incorporate it into the assessment, as Minister said.
If I can also add, Honourable Member, part of the, and I'm so glad you raised the point, the first question or point on history and legacy and its connectedness to the system. Part of what the ministry, of course, is also trying to achieve, of course, working with other ministries, is to correct what I call the infiltration of the mind of our young child, our young citizen. There's no secret that influences, whether it be in the global north or wherever, through music and fashion, continues to bear on the minds of our young people, particularly at their most impressionable age. And therefore, our curriculum, of course, it will not cure all, but it is the one place in which all of our children will go. It has to be one that gives them that confidence and understanding, and for the parents also to help shape it. That being a Barbadian not only means that you're resilient and creative, but it is a way of life. It is more than just being born here or residing here. And being a Bajan means that you are not swayed or influenced in the wrong direction. You know, you only need to look at leadership, yes, of course, at the political level, but in sport, in fashion, you have our two living national heroes who continue to do it incredibly well. Well, one has done incredibly well, and one continues to do incredibly well in terms of their endeavors. But that was done with the values of being Barbadian and not changing who they are as they go abroad. But many of our young people, through television, TikTok, and these things, look and see a world that doesn't look like ours, but it is packaged in such a way that causes them to feel this is what I must do. And we must now take our society, I don't want to say take it back, but hold firm, living through pride in the industry, woven through a curriculum, not just through assessments, but in activities that they do. Teachers also imparting that confidence with them. One of the things that we would have done at the beginning of this academic year, the 2025 academic year, in every single school across Barbados now, teachers at the beginning of class repeat a simple phrase, 3 words: nothing is impossible. I repeat, nothing is impossible. And why is that? If our people are to prepare for the world ahead, and not just, as the chief said, focus on common entrance and focus on CXCs and CAPE, but to be able to navigate and dominate the future, they will have some challenges to face. But they must be now, I don't want to use the word brainwash, but we must now shape their mind in such a way that they are confident in that maxim that nothing is impossible. And therefore, whatever challenge, whether it's in business, whether it's in sport, whether it's in infrastructure, whether it's in healthcare, and trying to find new solutions for the new age of Barbados, our young people must now be given that tool of realizing whatever may come before me, I can navigate. And that's why we also introduce into our schools, particularly coming this year, the introduction of chess in schools, the introduction of worry in schools, so as to give them that, not just critical thinking, but creating in them the ability to think 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 steps ahead of any circumstance. Yes, now, out of that experience, you might have 1 or 2 grandmasters coming out of that. That's a good thing, but that's not the focus of it. We're not looking to have the best chess players in the world. The purpose of that is that through chess and worry, we also want to give them those skills to be able to think critically and think ahead of any set of circumstances before you. So down to its even basic core. You're on the playground, or you're in the canteen at school, or wherever you are, and conflict will arise from time to time, but you have some choices to make. Do I go off and cause harm to my fellow schoolmate, not realizing that if I do so, these are the consequences that can happen? Or do I, through the emotional learning that the foundation is preparing them for, be able to adapt and say, okay, if I do this, this is the consequence. If I do that, that is the consequence. Notwithstanding the pressure that may be coming on you. Because why? We're preparing them also for life. Because these are the things that we adults have to navigate every single day outside of school. So it's really about, yes, helping them to become certified and qualified. But as I said in the onset of my presentation, it is about giving them the tools and values to be able to navigate and dominate life as it presents itself.
Minister, I noticed in your response, you spoke of being well-rounded Bajans, and you used the word Bajan. You used the word Barbadian one single time. And it got me to thinking that as part of our history, and certainly our cultural and linguistic history, that our language, the Bajan dialect that we speak, forms an important part of our national identity. Yet, we have struggled, and when I say we, I take myself back to my days at university within the linguistic department, where we would struggle for years to get teachers to not necessarily to teach Bajan dialect, but to teach students the difference and the importance of Bajan dialect, the where and when, and the fact that even though it uses some of the same words that are found in English, in the English language, that Bajan dialect is not necessarily English, and persons should have the ability to code switch, to speak both registers. I know that the university has produced a dictionary of Bajan words, and certainly when I was a lecturer at university, I taught a course in the compilation of Bajan expressions. I think these two should also form a part of the students' experience, certainly at the primary and secondary school level, where they will have an appreciation for not only the Americanisms that we've come to appreciate over time, but also the Bajanisms that we've used and have served our parents well over the years in terms of transmitting knowledge and information, imparting knowledge and information. So if there could be a carve-out within the curriculum that looks at not only teaching the history as it relates to our experience on the plantation and so forth, but also the language that we would have used to survive and communicate with each other over the years, I think that would be a great addition.
Yeah, thank you, Honourable Member.
Before you move on, Honourable Minister, this is a follow-up question or a new question, sir?
It's not even a question, it was basically a suggestion, really.
I will treat it as a new question, Honourable Member.
Yes, do that.
So therefore, you would have to yield after so that we can move on to someone else and then come back with any other questions. Unless the question is a follow-up question.
Well,
Proceed, Honourable Minister.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Honourable Member, for the point raised. Now, what has to happen and what is already happening is that the ministry is relooking the relationship of language, whether it's English, Asian, French, Spanish, Chinese, Arabic, you name it. And why is that important? Language at its basic function is about communication. How do we effectively prepare our students to communicate to the target audience that they are at? So there will be time when our students must be engaging in formal English. Of course, that is the language of instruction of the country, so they must be able to master that. And that is one of the reasons why we've rolled out and will continue to roll out an aggressive literacy program to give our children the tools to be literate and to be able to speak and communicate and comprehend. But more to the question of Beijing, the Honourable Member is absolutely right. We grew up in a time, of course, when it was almost taboo if you spoke Beijing. Now, there's a role for the two, and we have to give our children the skills to be able to navigate and to know when to use which language, which dialect. So if you're speaking to an English audience, you want to convey certain thoughts, English. If you're speaking Bajan and you want to communicate in a Bajan way, because there's some things, Mr. Chair, as you know, that we have to, or that we can better express, notwithstanding the formal English. We see our Prime Minister being able to do it masterfully and effectively, even on the global stage. So it is about preparing our students and to helping those who deliver teaching and language instruction to understand the importance of that and to have it woven and accepted into the system, and not to see Bajan as, oh dear, why this body is speaking Bajan, or why is this body speaking English, but having the tools to be able to navigate between the two. But thirdly, I want to use the opportunity to talk about the fact that we are also aggressively ensuring that our country can be multilingual. One of the things that we're starting to work on in the schools, and I want to commend the Ministry of Finance, and in particular Minister Strawn, the SOMOS program, where a lot of our schools, we're going to now see even the signage in the schools reflecting different languages. So a door, for example, La Puerta. Why is that? If children on a day-to-day basis in their environment can see different languages, it becomes part and parcel of their reality. I often use the example of when I lived in Europe. The average child in Europe can speak at minimum 3 languages fluently because they're exposed to it. The environment is there. And we have to now prepare our students to be able to be multilingual. And therefore, it requires now a mindset shift in how we approach languages, but it also lends to us being able to prepare our young people to be competitive now and into the future.
Thank you, Minister. Just to close by saying, I have another question. I guess I will yield and come back a later date. It's a parochial question. If I can place it in now, I would appreciate that.
Honourable Member, proceed. Not a new question. Proceed with your comment.
All right. I was going to make the point quickly that if we cannot convince our young people to appreciate our language, it'd be very difficult to convince them to appreciate our history. So it's important that we really put some effort into ensuring that our Bajan dialect is seen as equal in some sense in terms of importance to our standard English variety. And thank you very much for your response, Minister and Chair and Chief.
Thank you, and you're welcome.
Honourable Member for the City of Bridgetown.
Is the building door to him? Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that you do not report progress to His Honor the Speaker and beg leave to sit again.
The question is that I do not report progress to His Honor the Speaker and beg for leave to sit again. All honorable members in favor, say aye. Honorable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Chairman has reported progress and requests leave to sit again. Honorable Leader, Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move the suspension of the House until 2:30 p.m.
The question is that this honorable chamber be suspended until 2:30 p.m. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This honorable chamber stands suspended until 2:30 p.m.